Good evening. Welcome to the first installment of, of our Sunday chat. One of the things that I said to you the last time I was live was that I would be on every Sunday to talk to you from 6 to 7:30 about the various issues that are impacting our community. Again, my name is Eric Dawson, and I'm running to be the Congressman of the 10th Congressional District. And the reason I'm running is because our current Congressman, Donald Payne, is an absentee landlord, if you will. One of the things that I want to, well, there's several things that are on the agenda. I'm going to ask you to bear with me as I go through some of the topics that I want to discuss tonight. But there was an event a few days ago down in Atlantic City where I saw all of the elected officials who are part of the Democratic Party gather. And one of the things that I saw missing from that event, as much as they ate all of the food and danced to all of the music and hugged and kissed and took selfies with one another, what was absent was the ordinary people. Those people who are still homeless, those people who are dealing with foreclosure issues, those people who are dealing with joblessness issues, those people who are working 2 and 3 jobs. So while they danced the night away in Atlantic City, people in New Jersey, and specifically in the 10th Congressional District, one of the poorest districts in our union, suffer. And so it says to me that while they're in their ivy towers, they are not connected to the people. And what we need are people who are connected. We need elected officials who are connected, boots on the ground, with what's going on. So one of the articles that I'm going to share with you is the connection that our elected officials have with corporate America. That they sit on committees and they make judgment calls about these particular corporations as we're fighting against them, whether it's the fossil fuel industry, whether it's the healthcare industry, the pharmaceutical industry. We have senators and congressmen who not only receive hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars from these industries, and then they employ lobbyists to work in their offices that draft legislation that they then vote on. And then they sit on these boards and they have stock in many of these companies. And so they're making millions upon millions of dollars, again, while the 99% fail and suffer. The other thing that I'm going to talk to you guys about, and there's several things on the docket, so bear with me as I go through them, is I want to talk to you about school funding. There was an article that I saw that continues to talk about the disparity in school funding when we're talking about poor communities, poor Black communities. When I say poor communities, I don't simply mean Black, but in this instance, we're going to specify Black communities. Even when they're compared to poor white communities, their schools are funded better. When you compare poor Black communities to white communities, or what this article says, non-white communities, right? To white communities that are more affluent, then there's a greater disparity in terms of the funding. And when we look at the racial wealth gap, when we look at the income gap, when we look at all of these things that are creating a chasm between poor folk, and in particular, foundational Black Americans, and the white community, we have to start in large part with education. Another thing that I'm going to talk to you guys about is the pension system here in New Jersey. There's an article, there are actually 2 articles. And as I'm reading and getting more familiar with this, what you see politician after politician after politician kick the can down the road. And according to one article, we're set for a $1.2 billion time bomb to go off. But that time bomb is not going to go off, according to this article, until after Governor Murphy, if he wins re-election. And so instead of him doing what I believe is the right thing to do, which is to be honest and forthright with the information, so that we can do what's right for all of the taxpayers here in New Jersey, what Governor Murphy, in my opinion, has decided to do is kick the can down the road beyond his election, so that it is not an issue that taxpayers are faced with. But afterwards, Governor Murphy will have to reconcile a budget in addition in the year that the pension system is going to be reworked out, we're going to have to fully fund it. So there's going to be, according to this information, a double whammy on the taxpayers of New Jersey. And then another thing that I want to talk about is former Senator Flake mentioned today, or mentioned in the paper yesterday, that there would be 35 Republicans that would vote against Donald Trump, or vote to impeach Donald Trump in the Senate if the House of Representatives brought forth impeachment. But because of their cowardice as relates to re-election, they have chosen politics over the people. But when we have the discussion tonight, what I want to say to you is this. It's not just the Republicans that are doing it. The Democrats, kicking and screaming, and I'm talking specifically about the establishment wing of the Democratic Party. The establishment wing has gone kicking and screaming down this impeachment path. Moderate Nancy Pelosi has done everything she can to help out her pal, Donald Trump, who supported her becoming Speaker of the House after the midterm elections, when a majority of the new congressmen and women who ran under a progressive banner said they didn't want her. He was adamant about it, and now we see why. But kicking and screaming, she has now gone down the road of an impeachment inquiry. So let us start with the corruption of senators. So I'm going to play this clip, and when I get back from this clip, we're going to play a couple of them. So we'll be right back. Here we go. I'm sorry.
Chair recognizes Ms. Ocasio-Cortez of New York for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. So let's play a game. Let's play a lightning round game. I'm going to be the bad guy, which I'm sure half the room would agree with anyway. And I want to get away with as much bad things as possible, ideally to enrich myself and advance my interests, even if that means putting my interests ahead of the American people. So, Mrs. Hobart Flynn. Oh, and by the way, I have enlisted all of you as my co-conspirators. So you're going to help me legally get away with all of this. So, Mrs. Hobart Flynn, I want to run. If I want to run a campaign that is entirely funded by corporate political action committees, is there anything that legally prevents me from doing that?
No.
Okay, so there's nothing stopping me from being entirely funded by corporate PACs, say from the fossil fuel industry, the healthcare industry, big pharma. I'm entirely 100% lobbyist PAC funded. Okay, so let's say I'm a really, really bad guy, and let's say I have some skeletons in my closet that I need to cover up so that I can get elected. Mr. Smith, is it true that you wrote this article, this opinion piece for the Washington Post entitled, "These payments to women were unseemly, that doesn't mean they were illegal"?
Well, I can't see the piece, but I wrote a piece under that headline in the Post, so I assume that's right.
So I was told that there was an issue with the audio, but one of the things that that AOC was questioning was whether or not, if you were a member of the Congress or a member of the Senate, and you sat on these various committees and you were making decisions, you were voting on things that were going to impact those particular industries or those particular companies that you had stock in, and you were going to be voting because you sat on a committee, would there be any illegality to it? And if you were a corrupt person and wanted to intentionally sit on a committee because you, your family members, and friends had invested in that company, whether or not there would be any illegality to it. And the answer from the gentleman was no. So I'm sorry you didn't get a chance to hear that, but I'm going to try to get that played for you later. But what I want to bring up is this.
Chair recognizes Ms. Ocasio.
So the headline says, U.S. senators have reportedly piled up to $96 million and stocks, including companies they regulate. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. So and then here's the next clip. It says 51 U.S. senators and their spouses have up to $96 million invested in corporate stocks, according to the analysis by Sludge and The Guardian, raising conflict and interest concerns. It says Senator Richard Shelby, Senator Shelley Moore, Capito, and Senator Jackie Rosen own significant amounts of stock in companies they oversee. Together, 10 members of the Senate Banking Committee hold up to $8 million worth of stock in finance, securities, and real estate companies. It says, an analysis by Sludge and The Guardian, a deep dive you can check out here. Look at the senators' disclosed stakes totaling $28 million to $96 million across finance, defense, health, communications, electronics, and energy and natural resource companies. I'm going to continue to read this because this is absolutely phenomenal. It says legislators are under mounting pressure to crack down on predatory lending, abuse of user data, climate change, sweetheart military deals, prescription drug prices, and the opioid crises. Senators' stakes in banks, tech giants, fossil fuel companies, defense contractors, and healthcare giants could temper their desire to tackle those issues. And there lies the problem. I'm going to continue and then we'll be back. It says the median investment range was between 100,000 and 365,000, Sludge and The Guardian said. The most popular stock included Apple, Microsoft, Google owner, Alphabet, Amazon, Berkshire Hathaway, and Wells Fargo. Several lawmakers hold shares in companies they oversee, the analysis found. Senator Richard Shelby owns between $1 million and $5 million worth of stock in Tuscaloosa Tile Company, a private real estate insurance firm, despite sitting on Senate Housing and Insurance subcommittees. 9 other members of the Senate Banking Committee hold financial stock, including Senator Doug Jones, Senator John Kennedy, and our very own Senator Robert Menendez. Last one. The trend extends beyond banking. Senator Shelby Moore Capito owns substantial stakes in Microsoft, Intel, AT&T, and Verizon, despite sitting on technology and consumer protection subcommittees. Senator Jackie Rosen, who also sits on those subcommittees, owns up to $480,000 worth of Amazon, AT&T, and Adobe stock. So, when you ask why you don't have a gun, is there any real reason to continue to ask that question? It's very, very clear, guys, that the majority of these politicians are getting into the business of politics. And the business of politics, let us be clear, has nothing to do with the interest of the American people. It has to do with furthering their wealth at the cost of the American people. Call-in number here is 908-481-5499. I think that it is time for a couple things to happen. One is we need to call for term limits across the board. I am in favor of term limits. If you elect me to be the congressman of the 10th Congressional District, I will go and I will fight for term limits. In addition to fighting for term limits, I would fight for legislation that forbids any person who's sitting on a committee to oversee, that oversees companies on the committee that they sit on, to invest in those very same companies. If you, as the taxpayer, can't see that there's a direct conflict of interest, that there might in fact be some insider trading going on. I mean, I just want you to imagine, if you knew, for instance, if you were sitting on a committee for infrastructure, and you knew that they were getting ready to plow through a particular community to build an off-ramp to a highway. So you knew that the property values of those houses were going to plummet. And so you invest deeply into the real estate market in that community. And what you do is you say, well, you know what would be valuable here once they do the off-ramp? Maybe a Wawa, maybe a 7-Eleven, maybe some gas stations, but certainly not housing. So then you began to invest your money in those kinds of things. Well, it was the inside information that you had that there was a plan to decimate that community and put an off-ramp in that led you to the decision to take your money and to off-ramp your money into that particular community in the real estate market. So it is time for us to say enough. There's no reason when you look at what a congressperson makes annually that you should have Congress folks and senators who are multi-millionaires, some living in $10-12 million houses. But they sell to us the idea of going to Washington to serve the people. And again, that's why when I looked at what was taking place down in Atlantic City, and I saw all of those elected officials dancing and singing, and laughing, drinking, and eating, while Rome burns, while New Jersey has some of the highest foreclosure rates, while New Jersey has some of the most segregated schools, while the 10th Congressional District is in the worst shape of many of the districts in our union. They were down there dancing and partying. So I say it's enough. $96 million into stocks is more than enough. It's more than time to say enough. The other thing that I wanted to bring up to you guys, and I'm going to try to get it on the screen as quickly as I can, and this goes into the conversation about the unfair funding of our schools. And so the headline reads, non-white school districts get $23 billion less funding than white ones. A new report finds that funding gaps between white and non-white districts persist across all poverty levels. So again, it does not matter whether or not you're impoverished non-white community and you're going up against an impoverished white community, you're still being underserved. Certainly we realize through all the data that a community compared to an affluent or an impoverished non-white community compared to an affluent white community with regard to the education system, the funding gap is astronomical. So it says the researchers at EdBuild calculated that racially concentrated non-white districts receive an average of only $11,682 of funding per student in comparison to $13,900 for racially concentrated white districts. Collectively, this means that, as EdBuild notes, non-white school districts receive $23 billion less than white districts despite serving the same number of students. I'm going to let that sink in for a minute before I move on to the next one. So here's the next one. It says gaps between racially concentrated white and non-white districts persist even among high poverty schools. On average, nationwide, high poverty white districts receive approximately $1,500 more per student than high poverty non-white districts, although they still receive less funding than their wealthier white districts. Additionally, even low poverty non-white districts receive less per student funding than high poverty white districts. And here's a chart that demonstrates it. When you look, you see that non-white districts receive $11,682. The national average is $13,118, and white districts receive 13,000 and $13,908. I'm going to go to this next graphic. It says school funding matters in an off-cited paper published in the American Economic Journal. The economists Julian Lafortune, Jesse Rothstein, and Diane Whitmore calculated that 1900s era school finance reforms produced large improvements in achievement for students in low-income districts that received more funding. And here you see the data that supports that, right? I'm going to allow you guys to take a gander at that. And for those of you who are not fortunate enough to be able to see it, I'm going to read it for you. So it says white districts, right? High poverty, white districts, $12,987. Low poverty, white districts, $14,121. So when you have the non-white districts, you have the high poverty at $11,500. So the $11,500 is short the $12,987 of their counterpart high poverty in the white district. And then when you go to the non-white district, it is at $12,205, which is short the $14,121 in the low poverty white district. So we see major disparities here. And so it says, despite this knowledge, most states continue to rely on local property tax for school funding, which dramatically disadvantages low-income districts. The Ed Build report also discouragingly notes that a recent popular antidote to school funding issues, lawsuits, is not solving the problem. Right? So it says in New Jersey, for example, where courts forced the state to award more funding to poor urban districts, there's a whopping $7,300 per student funding gap between poor white and poor non-white districts. And then here's the last one. It says, neither the courts nor legislators have fixed the fundamental school funding problem for low-income students, the report concludes, but they're even further from a fix for students in concentrated non-white districts, regardless of wealth. Fixing such a system, eBuild's researchers conclude, may require finally committing to challenging the funding aspect of local control. So, no more black faces without black voices. We're like a car with its wheels spinning in the mud. And none of the people who get in the car and step on the gas know how to get us out of the circumstance that we're in. But they keep running for office with slick campaign literature saying that they're going to improve schools, that they're going to lower crime, that they're going to lower taxes, that they're going to improve quality of life. Those are the four things that you typically see on the slick campaign literature that goes out. But I'll ask you, and I wish I had the time to be in the thread, and please take a moment and share the show. But I'll ask you, have you seen any fundamental changes in the last 20 or 30 years in your community? And you've seen, in some cases, the same elected officials being elected over and over and over again, recycling their campaign literature, saying what? Going to lower crime, going to reduce taxes, going to improve education, and improve quality of life. Those are the four things they continue to say because they sound good. But don't take my word for it. Walk out into your neighborhood or into your community, on your block, and you tell me whether things have fundamentally changed, whether your quality of life has been improved, whether your educational system has been improved, whether your taxes have been lowered, whether crime has been reduced. Those are questions that I would implore you to ask when you get your next piece of campaign literature, which is sure to come anytime soon. So now, before I move on to the next subject, what I want to say to you is this. The campaign that I'm running relies on you. I am running completely outside of the establishment. So I'm not looking for them to give me money. I don't particularly believe that they are going to report that my candidacy in their newspapers, which are bought and paid for by the politicians. I don't believe that any of that is going to happen. But there still is a way to get my message out, and this is it. And then beyond that, the fuel on the fire of this campaign will be you sharing the information, letting people know that I am on the air every Sunday from 6 o'clock to 7:30, prepared to talk to the residents about all of these issues and to talk about how I intend to go to Washington and primarily fight to tear down this corrupt system. So when people say to me, well, Eric, what is your platform? I think that that is the most insulting thing at this point to present to somebody, a platform. Every candidate that has won election so far has had a platform. And I ask you again, has your quality of life fundamentally changed? Has it improved? But they all had a platform. And so you're asking for another platform. And what I'm saying is this, the number one thing that has to occur in order to have the change that is needed is that this corrupt system has to be completely and utterly torn down. When you look, and I started talking in the beginning of the show about what's happening right now with Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not the problem. He is a symptom to a bigger problem. And that problem was created by the Democratic and the Republican Party, not just the Republicans. And so for the Democrats to try to convince you that this is a problem solely at the foot of the Republicans, or that Donald Trump is the issue, is a lie. They have both had their hands in molding the monster that we see. And the only way to deal with it is to dismantle the entire system. When you look at what's going on in Minnesota now with Amy McGrath, and I'm in complete support of Amy McGrath because of her desire to remove Mitch McConnell. So if we see that we have a system that's not working for us, it's important that we get involved, not just here, with our local elected officials, right? Not just electing me to be the congressman in the 10th Congressional District, but understanding my responsibility to take this ideology to Washington and lock arms with House representatives like AOC and Ilhan Omar and Ayanna Pressley, right, and Rashida Tlaib, to lock arms with who I believe is going to be the Democratic nominee, either Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders, and those 7 courageous Democrats who fought and pushed Nancy Pelosi to the brink of having inquiries into impeachment. All of those people need support. And so, in as much as I'm going to be continuing to knock on the doors here in the 10th Congressional District, talking to residents here about their specific needs, there are needs nationally that have to be addressed. And they will only be addressed in a true way by courageous folks who are not concerned about poll numbers and who are not concerned with whether an opinion is popular or not. The question is the right thing to do. And if it's the right thing to do, then it's the thing that should be done. One of the other things that I want to now move on and talk to you guys about, if I can pull it up very quickly, is and this speaks to that particular issue. So here, Jeff Flake, former Republican senator, says at least 35 GOP senators would vote to remove Trump if the vote were private. It says Flake reinforced Trump's power of the Senate GOP, stating that this is the president's party, without a doubt. And to win a Republican primary in just about every state, you've got to be with the president. And there's a lot of fear that if you aren't, you'll get primaried. So that issue is not just an issue, again, with the Republican Party. If you recall, when you had progressives in the Democratic Party talk about primarying because issues that were concerning residents were not being addressed, there were threats that were being made across the board saying that vendors who would work with those progressive politicians would be contracts would be discontinued with the DCCC. So the fear that folks are ready to say that incumbents have in the Republican Party over Donald Trump's stronghold over them. Well, look at Nancy Pelosi and look at the folks who lead the Democratic Party. They have an equally strong hold on, or they did. I think it's being loosened by the courageous progressive Democrats right now. But they did have a stronghold. But now we see in this upcoming election, the one that's going to be the primaries in June of 2020, I believe that there are about 25 to 28 congressional seats that are being challenged right now. So you have progressives who are running against established incumbents across the country to upend the status quo. And I would implore you to find out who they are, aside from me. Because much like Elizabeth Warren says and Bernie Sanders says, even if you were to elect me and I went there without having support, fighting for the things that you want, sure, I'd have a platform, but actually getting the legislation passed would be challenging. Again, as we see, you have a Republican Senate, so even with impeachment looming, the question is whether or not that Republican Senate will do the right thing and convict this president and remove him from office. So we can do away with all of that if we participate, again, not just in our districts or in our state, but that if we participate across the country in politics, if you've got $1, if you've got $2 or $5 that you can send a candidate who is challenging a failed politician, that would go a long way in making sure that these numbers, when it comes to crucial votes, whether you're talking about a Supreme Court appointment or you're talking about critical legislation that needs to be passed that would help your community. It's not just your senator or just your congressman that is going to vote on that. It will be the other 400 plus Congress folks or the 100 senators that would vote for it. So it's important that you get involved at that level. The other thing that I want to say, and I posted this on my page, and I want to get the number correct. I think I said that there are going to be 800 assembly folks running in New Jersey. And I asked the simple question, who are the people, so I'm sorry, not 800. It says all 80 seats in the New Jersey Assembly are up for election on Tuesday, November 5th. So this is a much closer election. My election is not until March. But again, understand, not until June, I'm sorry. But understand the significance of this Assembly election in November. The importance of it is this, that those Assembly folks will be critical to either dismantling the Democratic Party or strengthening the Democratic Party. And the question is, which do you believe needs to happen? If these assembly folks are strengthening the Democratic Party, and you believe that the Democratic Party isn't working for you, then you need to do whatever you can to dismantle it. So those 80 seats that are up for grabs, I would encourage you to figure out what district those are in and participate in those campaigns. Get involved in those campaigns. So there are 80 of them. This is a new show, so this is a new audience. So let me explain to you what's happening right now. The Democratic Party has assembled. They're assembling their district leaders. They're assembling their entire apparatus around getting this next level of politicians elected into office, which would be assembly. Now, the assembly, here's the issue with the assembly, right? The assembly is the separation of powers between Governor Murphy, right? So when we say in the assembly and the Senate, right, the state Senate and our assembly folks, those are the people who vote on legislation. So when we look at the laws that are passed, right, and the things that we want done, it is those assembly folks who are passing. So ultimately, they push back against the governor or they support the governor. So when we say, oh, the taxes are too high, or the pension's not being funded properly, or, oh, they want to dig into the new gas tax that they just imposed on us a couple of years ago to take care of some things. Or if we look and say, in Newark's case, look at what's happening with the water. Look at what's happening with the funding. The governor didn't call for a state of emergency. Well, you didn't have any assembly folks. Well, that's not true. You had Assemblyman Jamel Holley out of Roselle push back, right? And then what happened when he did? You had the remainder of the Democratic Party attack Assemblyman Jamel Holley. But what we need are more assembly folks who are pushing back against the governor when he makes failed decisions. And that's just not happening. So 80 seats are up in the November 5th election. So that election is just over a month away. I implore you to get involved. And one of the things that I want to say again is in my campaign, it is here. It's going to be between me talking to you every Sunday, me gathering with you Monday through Friday on the Eric Dawson radio show with co-host Kevin Jenkins and Diana Murray Clements to discuss these issues, to lay them out and unpeel the onion. It's going to be me knocking on your doors and engaging you. That is the way that I intend to win the campaign. But all of that's going to be fueled not by donations from those folks, but from me asking you guys. We've been rounding up a core group of people, and we did it today, what we're calling the foundation of the campaign financially. But we're asking anybody who sees validity in what it is that I'm doing to make a contribution. We're currently putting up our website. It'll be up very shortly. And it's electericdawsonforcongress.com. That is the URL. We will have a fundraising apparatus there, $1, $2, $5, anything that you can donate to ensure that Donald Payne is primaried and that I have a voice on the stage. And what I would really love to do is debate him about some of the issues that we're discussing here. So moving on to the next item to be. Let me finish the flake. I'm going to finish this, right? So here's what was said in the balance of this.
Pressure on Ukraine to investigate 2020 presidential challenger Joe
None of my
Biden is
audio
increasingly drawing comparisons to former President Nixon's Watergate scandal.
I don't
This
think that
follows
I
the
have
release
any
of
of my
Trump's call
audio
with
working
Ukrainian
today,
President
guys.
Vladimir Zelensky and a whistleblower complaint about the administration taking steps to cover up
So,
details of the conversation.
gonna
Here are
have
some key
to
similarities between the two.
figure out the audio
Nixon hired a team known as
later.
the Plumbers to find incriminating evidence about his enemies. Trump tried to outsource the digging into Biden to Ukraine.
So I have none of the audio. I'm not exactly sure why. But I have none of the audio working. Anyway, the conversation was about the fact that the president, in fact, did make a phone call to the president of Ukraine, and as the president of Ukraine was asking for additional weapons to continue to fight the battle against the Russians, Donald Trump said, "Well, you know what? I know you just had that conversation with me, but I need you to do me a favor." So the conversation around the whether to impeach him or not, or to investigate the idea of impeaching him, is about this quid pro quo. You do something for me because you're asking me to do something for you, and if you want what you're asking me for, then you have to give me what I'm asking for. So I wish I could play that, but I can't. So what I want to move on to now then, and I'll try to get the audio file up, and if I can, I'll do another recording, and I will air that audio file at some point. So here's the pension issue that I was talking about earlier in New Jersey, that's going on here in New Jersey. The headline reads, New Jersey public workers' pension system is the worst funded in the nation again. For the fiscal year that ended June 30th, 2018, the most recent year for which records are available, the Public Pension Fund had enough money to cover just 38.4% of what is needed to provide retirement benefits for some 800,000 current and future retired workers, according to the S&P Global Ratings comparison of public pensions. That's abysmal. That is absolutely abysmal. Moving on, it says, New Jersey governors and lawmakers for decades contributed less than the amount recommended by actuaries for nothing at all. Or nothing at all. But the system has been on a path to full funding. This year, the state is contributing 70% of what the actuaries recommended and should hit the full contribution, nearly $6.6 billion by 2023. And that's all true, but here's the catch. It says, to be sure, New Jersey's pension system is much worse off than the typical state. The average fund ratio was 72.5%. New York's pension system is nearly 99% funded, and Wisconsin's assets are about 103% of its liabilities. Shortly before leaving office, Governor Chris Christie lowered this assumed rate of return from 7.65% to 7%. Governor Phil Murphy reversed course, and we're going to find out why in a second, citing the hardship that it would place on the state and local governments, which would have had to come up with another $700 million in pension contributions. Murphy set the assumed rate of return to 7.5%, putting in place a plan to gradually reduce it to 7% by 2023. But these are all really false numbers, people, because the median assumed rate of return for states was about 7.25%, whereas S&P pegs a more sustainable discount rate at 6.5%. So he should really be at 7% or lower. But he went back up in order to create a short-term relief for taxpayers. The change was praised by the pension fund actuaries, who say expecting a 7% return on investments is closer to what other large funds can reasonably figure they'll get over the long term. I'm going to read the next one and turn these off. Well, turn this one back on. It says, phasing down the assumed rate of return over several years will ease the impact of local government budgets as contribution requirements increase over time, he said, adding that Murphy is sending a clear signal that the old way of doing business is over. Well, that's not particularly true. Because continuing on, it says, from the state budget that will be enacted by July 2021 to the one that will be effective July 2022, the rate will decrease from 7.3% to 7%. That's considered a big dip, this article says, for just 1 year. And there's a double whammy, which is what I told you before. Altogether, the payment will be about $6.6 billion, a year-over-year increase of more than $1.2 billion. The time bomb will detonate. And then beyond that, it says, Murphy's solution, and this is Sweeney, Murphy's solution is a blatant way to kick the can down the road, the cost of which is the soundness of our pension, he added. Senate President Steve Sweeney of Gloucester says New Jerseyans just cannot afford that. So, we're going to have a day of reckoning with the pensions. And it's better to have it now and to be honest with the people about what things are than to kick the can down the road. But this is, again, where politicians are playing politics over the people, right? And so for Phil Murphy, he understands the pain that's going to come, but understanding that he can only be a two-term governor. So I want you to understand this. He can only be a two-term governor, right? Because we have term limits as far as the governor is concerned. For him to run again, he's going to kick this can down the road for the pension. And then after he's reelected, all of what I just read to you is going to go into effect. And you're going to scream, you're going to holler. But to what end? Because then what he's going to do, understand this, he's going to say, if the state legislature doesn't move to pass it after he poses it, he's going to be able to beat up on them because he's got nothing to lose at that point. His governorship will be over. He'll essentially be running in his second term, much like Chris Christie was, just roughshod over everything. So now is the time to hold Governor Murphy accountable before he is reelected. So I want you to, when the show is over, take time, and I posted the articles on my page, but take time and look at them. But this is, again, where I'm saying to you, you have 80 assembly folks who are running right now, who are silent about this. But this is something that's going to burden New Jerseyans once again. It's going to burden. You've got Congress folks who were down in Atlantic City partying from congressional districts across the state. Not saying what the heck is going on, Governor Murphy. You got the U.S. Senator Menendez and U.S. Senator Cory Booker down in Atlantic City taking selfies instead of hearing the pain. And when that happens, it's going to bring a tremendous amount of pain. A tremendous amount of pain. The other thing that I want to talk to you guys about, and this got text to me, so I'm going to have to read this off my text. I didn't have an opportunity to post it. But if you guys, for those of you who follow me those of you who follow me on the Eric Dawson show, when I was in the studio, I had former NBA player, former Seton Hall All-Star, former St. Anthony's. I think he played at St. Anthony's. Oh no, he didn't. He played in Elizabeth. Luther Wright come and visit the show. And when Luther visited the show, I didn't realize the condition that he was in. I was zoned into doing the show. But Sydney Barnes, who was co-hosting with me, who also knows Luther, realized that Luther was under the influence of some narcotics and helped me escort Luther out of the studio. Well, this came across, and we just have to do a better job, guys, across the board at dealing with our black athletes. But the headline in this, and I'm going to post, it was in the Daily News, came out today. It says, the harder they fall, big man Luther Wright battles ever bigger demons. Luther Wright says he's rebuilding his life given the circumstances. It's steep and uphill. Wright, just 2 days removed from his 48th birthday, is lying in a hospital bed with blood seeping through bandages on both feet. The MRSA infection is draining out of his ulcers in 3 hours. Wright's 2 remaining toes on either foot will be removed because the bone disease is eating them away. There was more to this story. I don't know. It says, on top of these physical ailments, the Jersey City product is grappling with a drug addiction. His 25-year salary from the Utah Jazz, one of the more peculiar financial arrangements in NBA history, expires in just 4 months. I'm not going to say I'll be able to walk in balance. I'm not going to say no. I'm going to wait until they cut these ones off, he says, inside the Beth Israel Medical Center in Newark. Right now, I can still walk, but I'm putting all the pressure on the right foot where I have these 2 toes left. And then the article just kind of goes on and on. But here's the thing. So, young black athlete, drug addiction, no serious help from the NBA to be able to assist him and other organizations, resources. His money gone. This is a story far too often told about black athletes. And so we cheered them on as gladiators during their time in high school and college and then in the pros. And then they're forgotten. Luther Wright happened to show up in my thread today, but how many Luther Wrights are there across the nation? And so it's something that I think that we need to give some consideration to. So I'm posting this article right now. My hope is that you guys would read it, and and if there's any assistance that you might be able to give to him, or any words of comfort that you might be able to offer to him, that you do that. The other piece of news that came across my thread, and I want to ask you guys about this. The headline is, let me pull it up. It's taking a minute. It says, merging towns or schools might cut your property taxes. What Murphy just did about that. So this idea of shared services. New Jersey officials have long championed that one way to slash the state's sky-high property tax is for towns to merge shared services like police and fire departments and consolidate schools. Now, I'm going to tell you, I am not on the surface against doing that. When you look at the number of schools in particular that we have throughout New Jersey, and then you count the number of superintendents that we have to service each of those schools, if you have regional schools and you have one superintendent, you'd be able to cut a tremendous amount of fat. In addition, you'd be able to cut other administrative costs as well. Same thing with merging fire departments, police departments. You'd have one chief. You'd have fewer sergeants. You'd have fewer captains. You'd have, so all those salaries would be cut down. I'm not sure what your thoughts are regarding that, but The article, if I can pull it up, continues. It's unclear how, is this the correct article? Yes, I'm sorry. As we lead our state toward a stronger and fairer economy that we hope to build together, it is our administration's responsibility to provide these communities a platform from which to pursue efficient growth, achieve smart government, and provide relief to local taxpayers. So what he's doing now is he's created a $10 million fund for some of these towns to go away and come back with plans to be able to create a an effective shared service. So I'm not sure what your thoughts are regarding that, but I certainly would like to know. So Angela Turnbull, yes, I'll be on every day up until 7:30. And again, I apologize for not having the audio file working. The audio files were a huge component to to getting this going. Anyway, what I will say again is all of the things that I talked about, whether we say, and so I entitled this, "It's Time to Take Back Your Government." Our government, locally, nationally, has run amok. It doesn't serve you. Whether you look at your paychecks, whether you look at your health care, you look at your neighborhood, you look at your schools, you look at your taxes, you look at underemployment, unemployment, it's clear that government doesn't serve you. And then when I pointed out how government is serving those who are there to serve you by virtue of them sitting on various committees that oversee and regulate companies that they themselves are investors in. And then we wonder why we have a problem with whether it's the National Rifle Association, or we have a problem with pharmaceutical industry, or we have a problem with the fossil fuel industry. We wonder why folks won't admit that there's climate change happening. It's because the money that they're raking in on this side outweighs any moral compass that they might affix on taking care of your particular issue. So I'm asking, if you want change, if you want it, to consider supporting me. And there are a multitude of ways that you can support me. The most obvious way is to contribute to the campaign. And we're asking, because I understand the audience, so we're asking for modest donations. $5, $10, $2 if you had it. I saw an article where a person gave, I think, Elizabeth Warren $1 or $2 because that's all he had, but he felt the need to participate in democracy and to invest in a candidate, to financially invest in a candidate that he wanted to see sitting in the White House. So what I'm saying to you is this: if you envision me going to Washington fighting for you, if you envision me unseating Donald Payne, who I think we can all agree is ineffective. And he's ineffective, and let's understand why he's ineffective. He's ineffective because he has decided to be a part of the establishment. He is ineffective because he doesn't have the trust in you, the voter, to build relationships with you, to push against the status quo. And it is a challenge that all of the politicians face at one time or another, whether or not they're going to be about the business of building, which is what I've been doing with you, building relationships, having open and honest dialogue about the things that are going on, whether or not he's prepared to do, and he's obviously not. And so the easy way for him is to be on line A. And then for that, he sold his soul. And so to understand that, And to understand how to unseat him is the important piece. And to unseat him, you have to have an organization or brand that is equal in force or greater in force than line A. And so creating this organization through this media platform, as well as me knocking on doors, is going to be critical. But to get some of those things done, to power the website when it goes up, to keep this platform going, will cost money. Not a lot. And that's why I'm saying $2, $5, $10. I got pledges earlier today for $20 and $50. What I would also like is maybe reoccurring pledges. So maybe you can say $5 a month for the remaining part of the campaign. So the campaign is going to go from now until June. And so what can you give today? And what can you give monthly, if you can give monthly, to the effort? But it is required. Make no mistake about it. But if you want it, I'm prepared to fight. And then I'm prepared to go to Washington and do what I do here, which is to push against the status quo, to bring truthful information in a very clear and transparent way. And my number is always open. So not only is the number that's listed for the show down here just during the showtime, but if you wanted to give me a call and have a conversation with me, you can inbox me. You can call me through Facebook. Anybody who knows me knows that I answer the call back. But that's going to be what's required to get it done. And then, of course, walk with me when I go and I knock on doors. If you have time, if you have an hour, 2 hours to come and walk with me, knock on doors, that's always helpful. And for those of you guys who have asked about shirts and hats and other kinds of things, they're coming. The design has been done. The design is with the printer, and the printer is currently working on it. So if you'd like a shirt, my campaign can afford to give the shirts away. So I'm asking for a $10 contribution for a shirt. So if you do want a shirt, you can inbox me. You can reach out to Renee Brooks as well. She's helping to organize this, and we'll get back to you regarding getting you a shirt if you'd like one. And some fancy hats I was totally doing as well. So you can look forward to those. I think for today, unless you guys have any questions, I know I was set to stay on until 7:30, and there's certainly, and I certainly would be, if I could get the audio files working, but I can't seem to get them working. So let's see if I can. I'll look through and see. Okay, so here's a question by Angela. Do you believe that shared services, including code enforcement and other quality of life issues, would be beneficial to the community as it relates to learning community maintenance from better served communities as well as a cost savings? So this is what I would say, Angela. Shared services, the premise is good, right? On the surface, it works. It's all about accountability at the end of the day. So no doubt you would immediately be able to cut money, right? Because you'd remove a head count. Like I said, you'd have fewer superintendents, you'd have fewer chiefs on police departments and captains and things like that, right? Because you'd share across. The question becomes accountability. Who's handling that? So here's an example. If you, for instance, take Newark, and Newark is going to have shared police department with, I'm not saying that they're talking about this because I don't know, but let's say Newark is going to be shared with Irvington, or Newark is going to be shared with East Orange, all right, or Orange. The question that I ask now is this: how accountable is the Newark Police Department to the residents of the city of Newark? And so if you have a shared department and whoever makes that decision tips the scales based on the squeaky wheel making the most noise. And in East Orange is the squeaky wheel making the most noise. Or if Orange is the squeaky wheel making the most noise, then the question is, whatever the methodology behind managing police services, if that's going to be conducted based on a methodology that is appealing more to residents in East Orange or Irvington, then Newark residents might suffer, right? So you're going to have, they're going to be competing interests there. So I don't know. What I can say is this: when I look at Newark right now, if we're going to take Newark as an example, by and large, Newark is silent on a lot of issues that have a profound impact on it as a community. It's silent on crime. They're silent on education. Silent on the lead in the water. Silent on these continued increased taxes. And so I don't know if they would be silent when it came down to a more boisterous community making noise about how they want to share services that work for them. So I hope I answered that question for you. I don't know if there are any additional questions. I'm going to look through my feed and see if there are any other questions. But what I hope is that as time goes on, this becomes a big Q&A session, that people have questions about what's going on with funding the pension, that people have questions about tax increases, that people have questions about how I know what I wanted to talk about before I go. So, the mayor of Belleville, and I talked about this on Friday on the Eric Dawson show, and so make sure you guys tune in tomorrow. I'll be doing it from Studio D here in Bloomfield. Kevin's going to be on location for several days, and so I'll have Diane L. Murray Clement calling in. But talked about this on Friday. The mayor of Belleville put up a billboard because the state has been absent in supporting the residents there. So we hear, through all of these media outlets, how the state has been working with Ras Baraka in a myriad of ways, a lot of them, I believe, failed ways. But when we talk about what's going on here in Belleville and Bloomfield, the state government has been less engaged, right? And because of that, the mayor of Belleville put out a billboard saying, look, before you give $1 million to residents or to a city to teach them how to use water filters, give our residents in Belleville water filters. And so to that mayor, I say kudos. And my hope is that in future episodes, I'll be able to have him or residents from Belleville, as well as residents from Bloomfield, East Orange, Irvington, and other towns within the 10th Congressional District on the show to talk about the challenges that they're having and the lack of advocacy on the part of elected officials, because they're part of that club. And I guess that mayor in Belleville is not a part of that club. And so because he's not part of that club, those constituents in Belleville are suffering right now. And that's just not right at all. So this is the first installment of the the Sunday chat. I don't even know what to call it, but it will evolve. And leading up to the election, we're going to have 37 of these total. If there are specific things during the course of the week that you want me to compile information about to talk to you and share with you on Sunday, please inbox me in time for me to do the necessary research. If there are people within these other towns in the 10th Congressional District who have information that would be valuable to share, please reach out to me. Let's connect. I've got a meeting tomorrow with some folks out of Union, which is a part of the 10th Congressional District. I got a meeting tomorrow with some folks out of Hillside, which is part of the 10th Congressional District. I have a meeting with some folks from East Orange tomorrow, which is part of the 10th Congressional District. So it will be important for all of us to continue to have a conversation. And again, if you are running for one of those 80 assembly seats, please reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you and to figure out a way to help you if you're for the community, one. And then two, if you're for the community, how to leverage the platforms that I'm building to be able to help amplify your message. So please, you can hit me up on the inbox or you can call into the show Monday through Friday or Sunday, if you will. I think that I have covered everything. Oh, wait a minute. So, I think I have a question from, oh, hey, Tamisha. Hey, Yolanda Moore. So please hit the share button, guys. Let everybody know. This is a new show, but please let everybody know that I'll be on every day from 6 to 12. I thank you guys for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you next week.